Welcome. I'm Cheryl Mitchell, the president of Treleven, and it's been my pleasure to be working with this station to illuminate the lives of people in our community who are making a real difference in the world and to try to understand some about how they came to live here and why they do the work that they do. So I'm thrilled to have two people that I adore and admire as guests today. The very Reverend Diane Nancekivell, who is now part of the team at St. Stephen's, and Tom Baskett, who's the co-clerk of Middlebury Friends Meeting, which is the Quaker meeting that I attend here in Middlebury. Thank you both
Welcome.
for coming. I'm
to be
thrilled
here.
that you're both here.
Thank you.
And it's always fascinating to have couples who are here together who do different work in the world and also work together to sustain each other. So I'm trying to think about the best place to start, and I guess my first question might be, what brought the two of you to this community?
Well, I will start off on that. I think we'll probably agree on
Which in and of
we
itself.
don't often, always in that case. But this one we were pretty much together on. We were looking for some place that our kids, we hoped, would like to come to visit us. And we started on the coast of Maine, and that didn't work too well for the kids. And so they all had experience here in Vermont. So we started looking, and we wanted a small town that would be an identifiable community and have a college in it. So we kind of finger fell on Middlebury pretty quickly.
And you come from Montreal.
That's
Was it
right,
Your childhood,
yes.
and I know because
All
my
over.
best friend is still in Princeton that you had some roots in
Yes,
New Jersey.
right.
So and that's pretty far apart for the two of you to meet. You
Well,
would have-
okay.
So we
This
met.
is our seminary story.
Oh, okay.
We met at seminary in New York City, the General Seminary, and yeah, the rest is sort of history.
So is the General Seminary an Episcopal seminary?
It is.
Seminary.
It
Okay.
is. And I was doing a Master's of Divinity through that, and Tommy was.
I was taking, we were both actually taking a course in spiritual direction. At that point, I was not a Quaker, I was an Episcopalian. And very briefly, I had a church history course, which said write a paper on comparing a church's architecture with its theology. And I was in Princeton, I knew churches, but I'd never been to a Quaker meeting.
Yeah.
So I went to a Quaker meeting, and I just kept on going. I never stopped.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And you've stayed with the Episcopalians.
Oh, yes.
And you've been.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about your history there?
So very soon after I was ordained, I was asked to go to the Cathedral of the Diocese of New Jersey in Trenton and help to pull it back together because it had been through a number of terrible traumas and clergy nonsense and acting out and so on. So it was left with a remnant congregation, and slowly we built it back up over the 6 years that I was there, and it was wonderful. It was the most diverse congregation in the whole diocese, a large diocese of about 150 churches and 300 odd priests. And we had Africans, African Americans, Caribbeans, and people from two different parts of Africa, Nigerians and Liberians predominantly, a couple of Ghanese. And through my naivete and ignorance and innate racism, I plowed into mistake after mistake, which I was fortunate enough to be able to own. And so they schooled me and taught me.
They
And
pretty much loved her, I have to say.
well, generously. And there was also a large white population within the church.
Yeah.
So it was hugely diverse and exciting and varied and challenging. And so finally, they were healthy and whole, and I recognized that having been the healer, the healing thrust, it was time for me to allow them to carry on as a healed congregation. And so I left and we moved up here. And one of the reasons we came is that we have a son here who lives in Burlington, and at that point wasn't married, but now is and has grandchildren. And so that's a draw for us and a draw for the rest of our kids.
Yeah. So it sounds as if moving to Middlebury worked out well with that desire to stay in touch with your kids.
We actually started in Bridport. We had this wish list in New Jersey of getting a big farm up in Vermont, which we did, and ended being larger than we had really intended. It was 40 acres, but it was a beautiful house, and we both adored it. I just loved it. And that was where I started my first sort of social action activity was on the mosquito board out in the Limit Fair Insect Control District.
More controversial than which I can't imagine.
Yeah, well, it was. And it was kind of out of self-defense, but we needed to do something about them. And so I was on the board. I was actually chair of the board for 6 years. And it was a great experience. And a wonderful experience, helpful in getting the suburban character into a small community character, making that shift. And so I'm grateful for having had that experience out there.
And one of the things that's important to remember is that the Lemon Fair Mosquito Board works with larvicide, not with adult pesticides and stuff.
Right.
We've remained outside the critique of adulticides and so forth. So, and
so I think navigating healthy ways to do that.
Exactly. Yes. Thank you. It's very true.
Yeah. And you've explained sort of your role at the diocese in Trenton,
New Jersey.
New Jersey, which is my growing up area. I grew up in Princeton, but it makes me think about the work that you were doing until just very recently with Kids for Peace, also healing work. Can you tell us more about Kids for Peace?
Well, it's really interesting because when I retired, I just intuitively felt that I wanted to work somehow, some way with the situation in the Middle East, particularly in Israel, Palestine, because for me, the idea that Muslims, Christians, and Jews could not find a point of respect and mutual understanding was an anathema and heartbreaking. So I looked around, and the bishop here had just opened up a Kids for Peace camp, whereby he brought Muslim, Christian, and Jewish kids from the Jerusalem area together to Vermont to pair up with Vermont Muslim, Christians, and Jewish kids and send them off to camp for 2 weeks. And this camp was sort of in disarray, and he wondered if I'd be interested in seeing if we could make it thrive. And so I grabbed at that idea. It was wonderful because way back when I was a teacher, so I had that kind of background, and then my interest in interfaith discussions and so on was very vibrant for me. So when I started working with Kids for Peace in 2008 here in Vermont, we had a Vermont chapter and an Atlanta chapter. We no longer have a flourishing Atlanta chapter, but Vermont is still flourishing. We have Seattle now, we have Cincinnati, and we have Boston as well as a much fuller program over in Jerusalem. Each of these programs runs not only a summer camp, but also year-round programming, so that the kids develop their leadership skills, their understanding according to their age group, their understanding of the depth of the conflicts, and their understanding of each other's backgrounds and culture and faith. So it's a much, much larger group than it was when
But are they
we
still
began.
doing the groups at, was it Camp Common Ground where this?
No,
or at
we were
Rock
never
Point?
there. It
Where
was
were
at
you?
Rock Point, but we've now gone a little further afield so that we can be a little bit more flexible, because when Eid comes in the middle of the summer, not Eid, Ramadan, excuse me. When Ramadan comes in the middle of the summer, we have to be really flexible about when we can hold camps. So we've done a couple of camps in New Hampshire, but it's still our group here. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah.
Good.
I'm just thinking, I
Okay.
just finished reading The Lemon Tree, which
Oh,
the
yeah.
librarian from our
Marvelous.
Quaker, a marvelous,
Yeah.
marvelous
Yes,
Oh,
book.
yeah.
And
yes,
I was thinking about the role of the Quaker school in Ramallah that one of the members of the meeting went to. And
Yes.
I'm just,
And
Olivia.
Tommy has.
to Olivia, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and you two travel together sometimes, right? It seems to
Yes.
me you were there together.
Yeah, a
in
number of years
Palestine
ago.
A number of years ago.
We actually
And-
started as an interfaith tour done partly by Interfaith Peace Builders, but also by AFSC, by the American Friends Service Committee.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So we went there, and that was a very intense 3 weeks, was it? Almost
Pretty close, I
2 to
think.
3 weeks, where we visited all parts of the West Bank, including and also in Jerusalem. Went down to close to Gaza. We couldn't get into Gaza, but we interviewed all kinds of NGOs that were trying to do peace work in there. So it was really an eye opener and a very intense and certainly gave you an understanding of how complex the problems are.
Yeah.
there.
It was, I mean, the book just really did
Yeah.
open my eyes
Yes.
to what was.
Yes.
Yeah,
what was
that's a
happening.
great one for that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the whole issue of interfaith work, of people coming together, I look at the two of you and I think, so, here's
Well-
a Quaker and an Episcopalian sit down at a community television station. What can you tell us about what it's like for you to have different faiths and still?
Well, I think in many ways our spirituality is pretty close together. The individual religions are different, but the Quaker in some ways can be a quiet Episcopalian, whereas an Episcopalian can be a more ritualistic, sacramentally based Quaker.
Yeah.
And in our case, I think it works out that way because we're both sort of, I was going to say contemplative by nature.
Yes.
In many ways.
By
Diane
practice
does
as
more
well.
sort of outgoing, and the sacrament is more important to you. But I was reading recently that for Quakers, silence is the sacrament. He was actually saying silence is the Eucharist. And I look for parallels like that because I think the parallels are there, even though the forms are different.
It's been interesting to me because I remember that you were doing a study group together on Sufis.
Right.
Is that
Yes.
right? And what that's like for you to study together and still have your separate worlds?
Well, I think it enriches us, particularly as we hopefully mature in our faith and in our lives. The deeper you go, the closer you become. I remember one of our teachers saying that, the 5 great religions are separate when you're really superficial. Hinduism, Buddhism, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And the deeper you go, you meet in the center. And I think Tommy and I have really discovered that. And I would add that our marriage has been enhanced by the fact that he doesn't have to listen to me preach every week and lead worship and so on. It's one thing to have opinions over the dining room table. It's another thing to have opinions in front of a couple of hundred people week in and week out, and for a spouse to have to listen to that.
Yeah, I love this.
Isn't that wonderful?
It
Visual
really is.
image,
Yeah.
Isn't that wonderful?
Incredible. Yeah.
And it's, as you were saying, we studied Sufism together, but actually we studied all five of these religions in a 2-year course, and discovered exactly that it, the deeper you go, the closer together you come. And that's one of the things that the kids in Kids for Peace discover. As we, the program is 6 years long, so that children come in around the age of 13 and continue through to 18. And with each successive year, they get deeper and deeper in their understanding and in their knowledge and in the challenges that we invite them into. But all the way through, they see the commonalities one with another. As they're discussing their faith, another child will say, another youth will say, oh, we do such and such, and it's very similar, and they see it all the time. And it's very meaningful for them. And the deeper they go into their differences, similarly, the more they're able to be honest about their hurts and their fears and their challenges. And so those are the growing edges for each of the individuals in our program. Not just the youth, but also the adult leaders.
How did you find the young people and also the leaders to be part of this, both in Jerusalem and also here?
It's interesting. Most of them come to us because they've heard of it.
Really?
They're certainly in Jerusalem, they're desperate to find ways to, those who are desperate to find ways to befriend the other. Their families are, and the kids are. The youth created a program a couple of years ago when they went out in threes, a Christian, a Muslim, and a Jew, into the streets. And they stopped passers-by, and they said, do you believe in peace? And they asked a bunch of questions, and ultimately they said, we're from Kids for Peace. Each one of us is from a different faith tradition. Can you tell which one is which? And the strangers on the street could not.
Couldn't really tell. Yeah. Yeah.
And
That's pretty telling.
That's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
So both of you are leaders in your faith communities in different ways. You're the co-clerk of Middlebury Friends Meeting. You're now, maybe you could tell me a little bit more about the leadership team at St. Stephen's, because that's a new concept to me.
It sure is. It's new for us, too.
And I think of seminary as preparing people for leadership roles. I don't think that there's anything comparable for the Quakers. Or there might be, but
no, I think we've sort of democratized what tends to be kind of hierarchical in the seminary viewpoint, in seminary viewpoint. So what you all are experimenting with St. Stephen's is rather radically different.
Yeah,
so
it
I
is.
think it's important.
Can you
to
talk a little
about
bit
it.
about that?
So St. Stephen's is in an interim period where we don't have a settled priest. So there were a group of retired clergy like myself who for whom St. Stephen's is our worshiping home, and the bishop thought it might be an interesting idea, because none of us wants a full-time job, to put this team of 4 clergy together to divide and conquer the work, but also to bring to the congregation different voices, different styles, different ideas, and to model the whole idea of mutual ministry, of sharing ministry. And so we, as the clergy, work really hard to share our ministries one with the other and to communicate really clearly how we're doing that and what we're doing. So we meet every Mondays for 2 or 3 hours to line up our ducks for that week and report on our ducks from the preceding week. And we're having a lovely time. We're enjoying each other. We're all old enough to have been around a couple of blocks and appreciate our differences, as well as welcome them, because we recognize that where one has strengths here, another has strengths there. And together, we're a whole lot more capable and hopefully influential than we would be if we were just 1 or even 2.
Wow. So you laid down your role with Kids for Peace in order to take on this team at St. Stephen's?
No, not in order to. It was a coincidence. It was a happenstance of timing. I had been chair of the International Board of Kids for Peace for 4 years, we decided, wasn't it? 4 years, which was long enough. It was time for new blood. We had grown to a place where my skills no longer filled the need of the organization now. It's a lot bigger and a lot more international, and so we needed those kind of executive skills on that level that would take us to the next level. And one of the huge challenges at the moment is that the government has withdrawn all its financial support. And we were on the...
Just at the time when it seems like it's most needed.
Well, exactly, but it's part of the, the administration is leaning toward one side, and so peace organizations are finding their funding drying up.
Specific peace organizations where you have 2 cultures working together. So an all-Israeli organization can still get funding. Palestinian organizations, not so much. And no organizations that's working across the Palestinian-Israeli with both cultures are receiving funding. And we were on the verge of getting a $1.5 million grant. So it's pretty devastating and challenging. Yeah.
And I'm just thinking, so you also, I know part of your social justice work is tutoring the migrant workers who are here in our community, and I think for years we thought, okay, the situation's going to get better, there'll be immigration reform, and can you tell us what drew you to doing that tutoring work?
Well, I think as I'm sitting here listening to our conversation, the image of the 5 different, it mirrors our marriage together, starting out at the periphery when you're sort of out here, but as you go deeper, you get closer together. If you choose to take that journey, which not everybody does, but we have and have loved it. The same thing has sort of drawn me to these kind of programs, because I think there is a place where we are all one. We come from same creator, we're diverse, but we are all one. So opportunities to work across the diversity divide intrigued me. And so I got involved with the tutoring program, and I just saw, I only tutor one guy, and have a great time, and I love it. And we've got a, he said, you know, he said last time I was there, I look on you as my friend, you know, and just, you know, so if you're open for relationships will happen.
Yeah.
And these kind of opportunities, I think it's the best of what a small community can offer, are opportunities to do that. We were frustrated in New Jersey, the Princeton area, where there's sort of one suburb between New York and Philadelphia, you know, and it's a whole, there's no identifiable community, really. And
really hard.
and up here there is, so you kind of have a sense of where you are, but you have a sense of the other people who are in the community, and so it's rewarding to have these kind of connections. And I'm also a hospice volunteer, and that's another sort of segment of the population that you can.
Another one near and dear to my
Yeah.
heart, certainly, because hospice made such a difference for my parents in their last
Right.
years. And being part of that community, for us as, you know, their children and grandchildren, just knowing that there were other people there
Right.
that
Right.
cared. We are, unfortunately, this has gone far faster than I thought it was going to. We have about 3 minutes. I'm wondering if there are things that you would like to share with me or with the audience.
I would like to say that if anyone who's heard this program is interested in the work of Kids for Peace, either on behalf of their own children and youth or for themselves, there's an opportunity to serve. And please reach out to me through St. Stephen's Episcopal Church in Middlebury. You can get a message to me and I'll follow up, because we would love to make those contacts.
Yeah, my plea would be, we just spent a 2-day, 3-day silent retreat on Holy Cross Monastery down in the Hudson, and the theme of it was sort of open your heart, you know, and for a move from the head a little more into the heart space and open. And so this is a plea that we all do that, and work on developing what I call heart intelligence, which I think is at the spiritual root of all social activities that all of us get involved in, but particularly for young folks to sort of pay attention to that heart piece of
I
it.
love what you're saying about this being a community where so often people wring their hands and say, well, how can I connect with people that I think of as other? And you've just talked about many opportunities for doing that.
Yeah.
Thank
I
you
love it.
both very, very much for
Thank
taking
you.
the time to be
Okay.
here.
Thank you,
Really
Cheryl.
appreciate
It
it.
was a delight.
It's an opportunity to discover these things inside ourselves.
Right. And for those of you that are watching, thank you for watching. Please feel free to get in touch with either Tom or Reverend Nancekivell. And if you have something that you'd like to talk about, please get in touch with this television station. They are truly wonderful about helping people to get the message out there. So thanks again. You can stream us later. Bye.
Super.